and welcome to the episode of DIOTALK. I'm Dio. Let's talk. My guest of the evening is an author. He has his brand new book out that's called "Why You Feel the Way You Do." Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Reneau Peurifoy.
Good. Thank you for bringing me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's an honor having you. I do apologize again if I botched your name, by the way.
It took me about 5 years to figure it out myself. So,
oh man. So you have this great book out, but it's not your first book that you have published, correct?
right. Yeah. No, I was a counselor specializing in anxiety disorders. So my first one was on that, anxiety, phobias, and panic. And then did another one on anger, and then did another follow-up on anxiety, and then this one. So
awesome. So what inspired you to write this book right now that you're out? What initiated you to do the research and gather information?
Well, actually, I had a former client came to me and said she had a publisher interested in having me do a book, and so I said, okay. So I got to thinking about what I wanted to do it on. So I thought I've been just fascinated with emotions ever since I was a little kid. So I figured let's do that. Gave me a chance to catch up on all the current research that's going on, which is actually very interesting. Some exciting things happening in what they call affective neurobiology. Affective is just a fancy word for emotions, and so that's kind of how it got the genesis of this particular book.
Wow, I know. I earlier I was on your website, and I was watching. You have a couple of videos there breaking down certain emotions. One of the first one you have there is anger,
right?
Which is something that we all go through, right?
Right.
What are some things that you have able to find regarding anger that people are not aware about?
Well, anger and fear are the flip sides of the same coin. Both have to do with threat. And so fear, well, it depends on how you perceive the threat. If you perceive it as something that's manageable, you'll tend to get angry and take it out. If you perceive it as unmanageable, then you want to get away from it. And again, I use the words anger and fear in a very broad sense. So anger could be just irritation. I'm irritated, so please quit stopping on my toes, or it can be rage. Fear can be just apprehension. I got a interview coming up. I'm not sure about how I'm going to do on that, or it can be, grizzly bear coming at me, panic type of fear. So it's all the same emotional circuit. It's just, we have a lot of words for it, but it's just the same, how far the dial is turned up or down. And again, it all has to do with threat. Threat can be real, or threat can be imaginary, or perceived, I should say. Not. And we see a lot of that nowadays with politics and just all of the other crazy stuff going on. People see threats all over the place, which may or may not be real. So that triggers a lot of the anger and anxiety you see in our culture.
Wow. Yes, I know you in the video you break down, I can't remember exactly the wording of it, but it's like a myth or something along the lines, and where when you're angry, it's not venting doesn't help.
No, venting is just practicing being angry. Again, anger is threat, and how you respond when you're angry is a learned behavior pattern. And you learn that partly from your family you grew up in, partly from the culture you grow into, your surroundings. If you grow up in a really rough neighborhood, being angry helps you survive because you get a reputation. You get in my face, you're going to be sorry. And that's survival benefit, right? Get in a middle class business situation. Now that's not going to be so useful. It's going to get you in trouble a lot. So depending upon where you grow up and how you grow up, that determines on how you express your anger. And you can change that. You don't have to stay stuck with the same patterns all your life. Although, unfortunately, most people do because they just never see the need to change or don't think about changing. And I like to say emotions and anger is you need to act upon it, not act it out. So since anger is all about threat, the idea is you need to identify the threat and then figure out, how do I get rid of that threat? And I like to think of it with the least amount of harm to myself and others. We call that assertive behavior. I mean, sometimes being aggressive is important. If I'm a police officer and I'm chasing somebody with a gun, then I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive about that. Or if if I'm a fireman and I need to direct traffic and there's some danger coming up, I may be a little bit more aggressive about that than I would if I'm just, in a business meeting talking about something. So, anger, sometimes it's appropriate to be at the higher end. Uh, Sometimes it's appropriate to be at the low end. If I got to work and I got some kids to feed and the boss really, he's not a very nice person, I may suppress my anger because I need that money for right now until I can find something better going on. So, sometimes it's appropriate to suppress anger. Sometimes it's appropriate to amp it up. Most of the time, you wanted to use what we call assertive behavior. And again, how to identify what the threat is, what do I need, and how do I put it out there in a way where I'm going to get what I want, again, with the least amount of harm to myself and others. Basically, getting direct messages, direct action, that type of stuff.
Got it. Because how do I say this? What are some things that and a regular individual can do to not suppress but overcome that anger?
Well, I think learning how to say what you want directly and in an effective way. When you work like with couples, there's a lot of things people do that are not effective. For example, people, when there's something wrong, will get fixated on what's wrong. I don't want this, I don't want that. And I always say that the first step in being assertive is figuring out what you want. It's interesting. Sometimes you'll work with a couple, you'll say, this one person saying, well, and that person does this, and I can't stand it when that happens, and why are they doing that? And so she says, so what do you want in this situation? And well, then they do that. So what do you want in this situation? And then, I don't really, sometimes it takes you 15, 20 minutes to get to what the person actually wants.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step is always figuring out, what do I want in this situation? And then saying that in a way that's going to be effective without a lot of blaming and put downs, but just saying, this is what I want. And then sticking with that, because people tend to sidetrack you, right?
Yeah.
They'll say, one of the things that people say, well, that didn't happen. And then of course you get an argument as to who is right about what they perceive.
Mm-hmm.
No. And so you come back with things like, well, I can see we see things differently, but still I need you to be on time when you come to pick me up for work or whatever it happens to be, right?
Yeah.
So you keep focusing on what you want in a very direct way and don't get sidetracked on all these other things that people do, which it's an art. It's something that you can practice and learn how to be more direct and, talk to people so that you can express what you want directly, but in a way that's going to be effective.
Got it. So what do you do? Like you mentioned you've helped, you're a counselor, you help numerous of marriages throughout your 20 plus year career, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if you're stuck in a predicament again where you're trying to have a dialogue and the individual or the other person, whether it's man or woman in a marriage, are always trying to justify, whatever. If I say I don't like this, I don't want this, and this is the problem, and just trying to find a solution, but the response in return is always trying to justify X, Y, and Z. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
Well, again, some people are non-negotiators.
That's a great point.
I mean, and this is the other thing is the other person willing to, negotiate and, in a fair way or not? And some people are unwilling for a wide variety of reasons. Some people are unable to just because they're so caught up in their own drama and stuff that they can't see things in a more rational way. So the first step is you got to decide, is the person, a reasonable person that's willing to negotiate with me. Interestingly, one of the best predictors that a relationship is going to fail is if one of the partner refuses to negotiate. You bring up a problem and I don't want to talk about it, or they walk away, or they'll do the type of stuff you're talking about where they're unwilling to really decide or really talk about something and negotiate, reasonable solution. That's a big predictor that this relationship is probably not going to last very long term, because you really do need to take a look at problems and resolve them. It's interesting that marriages kind of go through a cycle.
Yeah.
When you meet somebody, you start off in that infatuation stage. And when you do like a brain scan, you find the frontal lobes are shut down, the emotional circuits all lit up, and everything this person does is just so wonderful. Oh, is that little quirk they have? That's so wonderful. And then later on, that little quirk becomes a major issue, right? And so then after you go through that infatuation stage, people tend to get into what we call the rule negotiation stage. What are the rules for a relationship? Who turns down the heat? Who feeds the cat? How do we do this? And, that requires some negotiation, right? And if you can get through that, and again, some couples stay stuck, for years in trench warfare over that. And some couples dissolve at that point in time because this person is not getting me what I want. I don't feel that high anymore. But if you can get through that, then you get into some real nice intimacy with a person. And that's, again, assuming this person is capable of intimacy. Because not everybody is. Some people are really damaged from their background or have things going on, or they're not willing or not able to have an intimate relationship, to negotiate, have reasonable limits and that sort of thing. And that's one of the things that when you work with young people out looking for, somebody in a relationship, you need to evaluate early on. And this will be a very unpopular thing to say, but especially for women, do not have sex early on. Because as soon as you start getting intimate, again, the frontal lobe starts shutting down and the emotions take over. Happens also with guys, but it seems to be stronger with women in terms of the brain scan stuff that they've done. So take some time, evaluate, is this person capable of intimacy? And you start looking for things like, how does this person deal with disappointment? Do they blow up? Do they get crazy? Do they, are they able to handle disappointments? When I want to go someplace and this person wants to go someplace else, are we willing to work it out? I want to have Chinese, you want to have, Mexican food. Okay, how are we going to work that out? Well, maybe we can do yours tonight and we'll do mine tomorrow. Okay, that's a reasonable negotiation, but maybe the person's not willing to do that. So those are the kinds of things that unfortunately people don't look at. They're looking for excitement, or they're looking for somebody that's, gets the biochemical thing going on inside their brain, and they can't get into that intimate stuff too early before they get a chance to really evaluate, is this going to be a reasonable relationship? So that would just be some piece of advice I threw out for people that are in that process of looking for it. Oh, the other thing is consider the pond you're fishing in, right? If you're fishing in a lot of singles bars, you're going to get a different quality of people than if you're fishing in, let's say, a bicycling club or some other kind of social group or church or thing of that nature. So, the pond you're fishing is going to determine the fish you catch, right?
Yeah, I agree 100%.
No mystery with that one. No, yeah. I don't think we're going to go into the relationship thing at this point in time. The other thing that I should mention is if you come out of a difficult background, with abuse or whatever, keep in mind that you walk into relationships with blinders on. People that have been raised in a healthy family, they just naturally sense when the other person, there's something wrong there. Okay. But if you have a crazy background you come out of, you walk into crazy and it feels okay. In fact, you can take a person from a difficult background, let's say a woman, and you put her into a room with 20 guys, right? Within 15, 20 minutes, she'll be talking to the guys that come from the same kind of background she comes from. And the way that works is it's an unconscious thing. She gets around people that have appropriate boundaries, appropriate disclosure, that type of stuff, and they feel funny. She gets around somebody with a similar background, it feels familiar. And everybody at this point in time is presenting well, right? So, but still there's that unconscious vibes that they're giving off, the body language, the way they're talking and stuff. It feels in some way like home. Okay. And so that feels familiar. And so that's part of why people tend to end up with somebody that's similar to, where they come from. I mean, I come from a healthy background. All my friends come from healthy backgrounds. We're all kind of similar that way. And people, I know when I've worked with people that come from difficult backgrounds, it's like all their friends come from that type of background too.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things I'll oftentimes do with them, I'll say, okay, one of the things you need to do is identify one or two healthy people or people that come from, healthy backgrounds and hang around them. And it's interesting. After we identify, how do you identify healthy? How do you hang around them? Their complaint is always the same. These people are so boring. There's absolutely no drama in their life at all, right? because oftentimes their background is one of drama, a lot of intensity. And so when there's not that intensity, it feels funny because at home, when the intensity dropped down, that means the other shoe was getting ready to drop. And so
Yes.
they're kind of wired for that. So, but if they hang around it, what they find is after, 6 months or so, it starts to feel really good and they like that. It's kind of like when I worked with anxiety clients, I would give them a relaxation response tape
Mm.
or CD nowadays, and or actually MP3,
Yeah.
and you know, and they would get anxious listening to it because the feeling of relaxation was so strange to them because they'd been anxious all their life. And so, in the same way, if you're used to a lot of intensity and drama, feeling around just low key comfort feels weird at first, and I don't know what to do with this. But after a while,
Yeah.
those circuits inside of you will respond to it, and it's like you start to get rewired from the inside out just being in that company, if you'll hang in there for a while. And that's kind of partly how you get rewired too. It's when you come out of it. I mean, obviously there's things you can do therapeutic wise and stuff, but part of that normalizing down the road is you got to start having some healthy relationships and being around people who can do that.
Got it. Got it. Which is difficult. I don't know. In my situation, it's difficult.
Well, it is. You got to look for it. And nowadays, it seems like it's more difficult because you got a lot of crazy stuff going on in the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
and a lot of people that really don't know, how to be healthy. It was interesting. I was listening to a program the other day, and they were talking about the statistics of young men in a poor neighborhood,
Yes.
and if it was a young white boy in a neighborhood, they had a 60% chance of having a male father figure in their household. If it was a young black man, it was like 4%.
Wow.
And so statistics like that, begin to show you this disintegration of the family and just the
The
disruption of neighborhoods and
values.
stuff. A person growing up in that type of environment, they have to learn what a normal relationship is all about.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And those acts, how do I say it? What is a normal relationships? Like there's in like media, celebrities, that
Well,
the
yeah.
world that's consumed with that. What is a normal relationship? If you have, famous people that are influential constantly getting divorced left and right, sleeping with X, Y, and Z because they were they
Yeah.
were made felt a certain type of way.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
we I feel, in my opinion, there's no really role models that aspect.
Well, and that is the problem because it used to be everything in a child's environment reinforced the values that they needed to grow up and be a healthy and happy individual. And nowadays, whether we're talking about, like you say, the media, music, everything seems to be opposite of what a child needs to grow up into a healthy individual. And it means parents need to, make more of an effort, which is sad because I was reading another article just the other day about how many parents are spending more time on their devices than they are with their kids.
Yes.
You go out into the restaurant, you see both parents are on their device, the kids are on their device, and nobody's talking or interacting. Uh, Social media and internet and stuff has some really neat things you can do with it, but it can be terribly destructive too. I mean, with young people, one of the big things that's talked about nowadays is the fear of missing out. And a lot of kids have that because all of their relationships are, focused on the media. They're seeing all these curated images of everybody having a better life than I'm having.
Hmm.
It's not really true. It just appears that way because you don't put your bad stuff up on the social media, right? You put that
Yeah.
smiling face and this wonderful meal I had, or this place I went to, or all these friends I'm out having a great time with. And so there's a lot of unreality that people are growing up in nowadays. And I know when I work with people, one of the things I suggest is, number one, don't watch the evening news. Cut that off because I worked a lot with anxiety disorder. So
Yeah.
quit watching evening news. Get your news 15, 20 minutes in the morning. Go online, find a site that aggregates all the news where you can look at the headlines, read whatever you want, but don't get it all that visual stuff. In
Got it.
fact,
Got it.
another study I was reading in Europe, they had people 18 to middle 20s reduce their social media by 1 hour a day. And
Mm.
after a couple of weeks, they were just a lot happier on all their when they did the self-assessment scores. And a month later, that maintained because they were doing other things other than social media that helped them just live a better life, engaging with people or some activity like that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And your new book, Why You Feel the Way That You Do, you mentioned that you explore the seven core emotions.
Mhm.
Uh, can you elaborate what are those seven emotions?
Right. And again, a lot of misunderstanding over emotions. And so neurobiologists, they talk about affects. And an affect is a wiring inside of you that makes you want to do something. Okay. So the most basic affects are your sensory affects. So hunger, excuse me, pressure, heat, cold. If I'm sitting too long in one position, then I
Mm-hmm.
really need to adjust myself. If I'm really cold, all my attention and energy gets focused on getting warm, right? The next set is what's called the homeostatic affects, and homeostasis is just a fancy word for balance, keeping balance in your body. And those are things like hunger and thirst. The thirstier I get, the more I look for something to quench my thirst. The
Mm-hmm.
hungrier I get, the more I have a drive and focus and all the other stuff kind of leaves my mind. I want to get something to eat, right?
Yeah.
And then your emotions are kind of like a next level up, and they get tied in, of course, to the thinking part of your brain. So think of emotions as they generate energy in your body, they activate you, and they create a desire to do something. A couple of the ones that are less known. One is something called seeking, and it's every baby. If you watch them, they want to explore the environment. They're
Yeah.
chewing on things, they're looking on things, they're feeling things, and as they get older, they're just trying things out. And you look at any mammal, because we share these same circuits with all the other, mammals in the world, is it's the desire to see are there good things or are there dangers out in our environment. That's why when you sit in a room and if somebody walks in, everybody quickly sees
Notice.
who's going
Yeah.
on. Or you go to the doctor's office or a new office or something. The first thing you do is you just kind of glance around, check it all out. That's that emotional drive that wants you to see is it safe or are there dangers? What's going on around there? And it's almost unconscious, but it is a driver inside of us. And it's what's underneath our curiosity as we get older too. That's why we get curious. We want to find out about stuff.
Yeah.
And again, all these emotions can be, dampened depending upon your childhood, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Another one that's kind of interesting is the play circuit. And the guy that did a lot of this initial research, Jacques Panksepp, he was called the rat tickler because he was working with rats, and he found he could turn off the thinking part of the rat's brain. They still wanted to play. And with mammals, it's how we learn social limits. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
watch my 3.5-year-old granddaughter on Mondays and Tuesdays, and one of her favorite games is Tickle Me, right? But just, in all of the play, sometimes she does too much. And so, hey, that's too much. And even as adults, we like to interact with that play, right? That circuit's still there. And that's part of how we again learn how to work with each other. We learn a lot about limits and interacting through our play circuit. The ones that we're more familiar with, of course, are the anger and the fear, the threat. There's another fear circuit that they call panic, but really we know it as separation anxiety with babies. When the parent separates is not visible to the child, a lot of times they'll go into distress, right? They'll start crying, and that triggers the caring circuit in the adult, and so that's part of what underlies our tying us together as adults, and that's why we miss people when they're away. It's that separation anxiety or panic circuit, that part of what bonds us as adults. And then, of course, there's the lust circuit, which we all know about puberty when that gets activated, right?
Yeah.
And so four of these circuits are all about relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things, unfortunately, that a lot of people lack nowadays. In fact, in the book, I wrap up with the three things that make people happy. And the big one beyond everything else is having meaningful relationship. If you've got
Yes.
somebody that accepts you as you are, you can be transparent with, and have a great, relationship, and you interact with them on a regular basis, probably you're not going to have to worry too much about your mental health. But unfortunately, a lot of people go through their entire day without one meaningful social interaction, other than maybe on Facebook or something like that. And that's really not meaningful, not what I mean by an face-to-face interaction. In fact, I was watching another study that talked about how much more rewarding on just a biochemical basis when they measure the different stuff inside of a person, a face-to-face interaction is, as opposed to a like a Zoom meeting or something like that. Because again, a lot of our communication is nonverbal. Little kids read adults just like a cat or a dog. They know your body language, your tone of voice, all that stuff. We become very tuned into language as we get older. And so we tend not to be as aware of that unconscious communication that's going on, although it's still there. We still pick it up, which is why we get vibes about people. And the simple example I often use is use the simple phrase, I love you. I can say, I love you. Hey, I love you. Hey, I love you, guy. And you know what each one of those means without me explaining it, because that's wired into you, and you've learned that as you grew up how to read that kind of unconscious, message underneath the words.
Got it.
So those are the seven basic ones. Your play, seeking, lust, the two fear circuits, danger, and then separation anxiety, and then anger, and then the caring circuit. And then, one other thing I might add is emotions, in addition to being messages about needs that motivate you and generate energy and focus, is they're also the way the brain indexes information. So the brain is always making associations, even from the time you're in the womb. And whenever there's something that's very positive or very negative, there's an emotional tag that gets put on that association or memory, if you will. And what that does is the brain uses that as it manages your life, because again, most of what's going on is unconscious. If I'm driving a car, if I'm walking down the road, my brain is not only coordinating my body, but it's, all the things it's learned how to do, it's doing automatically. It's looking out for dangers, anything, truck goes by, oh, that association comes up and I check it out, it's all that's going on at an unconscious level while I'm thinking about, what I'm going to have for lunch, what's on TV tonight or whatever, things of that nature. And when things that, like if I grew up in a difficult, violent childhood, then a lot of things that normally are okay, a lot of times they'll get that emotional tag as danger. And so we call those emotional triggers, right? So maybe a tone of voice or certain types of situations in the past were dangerous. Now, when I get in that situation, my brain is going to put me on alert and make me anxious because it's expecting something bad to happen.
Yeah.
And
I suffer that a lot.
Yeah.
I suffer the tone of voice. Like, I have a problem in where, like, I dislike taking crap from people.
Yeah.
Like, and I realize it. I realize
nobody really enjoys that, I don't think.
Yeah. I think like it's only when I want to say it got worse when I got married.
Yeah.
And, responsibility in life and children, and where like I cannot tolerate, like, it's only much I can take. If not, it's like a light switch is gonna flip. I'm gonna flip. And if I'm spoken to a certain a degree, I get defensive. If I hear too much slamming, I get triggered. Like if noises become unbearable, like too overwhelming, it's like a level of sensitivity within my ears that now I start getting aggravated.
Right. Well, and again, I'm guessing there's probably some stuff in your background that helped contribute to that. But the way you deal with it, and again, there's a whole lot of stuff, right? But I'll try to simplify it with a few things. Number one, when we talk about anger as a behavior, when I work with people who have a short fuse, one of the things that they need to get locked into place is stopping when the anger first comes up. Like if you work with couples, the first thing you want to lock into place is a walk away strategy. When you're angry, you need to stop, walk away, calm down, and then assess the situation and depend upon whether there's something you need to take care of or whether this is coming, from the past or some other place. So when you look at people who manage situations and anger well, you'll notice that they tend to pause for a second and kind of
Take a deep breath.
Get the thinking part of their brain hooked in, because when emotion first flares up, your thinking part of your brain kind of shuts off for a little bit, and you kind of go on to that automatic learned behavior patterns. So you got to regain that, and that's the first thing you need to do, is to stop and do it. And the other thing is, be aware of your action point. I know when I've done parenting classes, this is something I'm really big on, is there's a point where you take action. So like with kids, you'll see this, how many times have I told you? I've told you, okay, I'm telling you again. Okay, quit making me tell you. I'm going to, at some point in time, you act, right?
Yeah.
And with being an effective parent, one of the things we used to talk about is, number one, you need to have a plan of action. And if you set a limit, you need to act now, not wait, and not give a lot of warnings, not what we call shooing flies. But if you're willing to, if it's a real limit, you need to take action. Otherwise, your words don't mean anything. Your kids learn to be parent deaf, right? And you see that with a lot of kids. They'd ignore their parents until they get really crazy and red in the face. And then they've learned, that's when I better start doing something, right?
Got it.
So if you act early on, then they learn that you mean what you say.
So in other words, you can't be a pushover.
Right. And so the same thing is take a look at, are you noticing that you need to take action earlier on, or are you sitting on it for a long time until you get to the boiling point, right? Because it may be sometimes that you need to identify that I need to take care of this, do some kind of assertive behavior early on before I get to that kind of aggressive and crazy behavior, right? So that's one of the pieces that sometimes you have to look at, is where's my action point? Do I say something early on, or do I sort of sit and wait for it?
See, I have like how do I say this? I have trouble connecting with individuals sometimes, because I'm not the type of person. This is not baseball. I don't give you 3 strikes, right? I tell you once and that's it. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to inform you what the things you're doing or things you're saying is not to my liking. I'm not gonna wait till my 3rd strike. I'm gonna tell you right there and then.
Okay.
Right. So, but also, like, I've been told, and we're like a ticking time bomb. I went one time to a therapist very young, and we're like, I am an individual that I keep holding and holding and holding and holding.
Which is what I was just saying, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is if you're not taking care of business in one area of your life, it's going to spill out in the other area.
Yes.
And it'll tend to make you a short fuse in that. And so sometimes part of it is learning to keep what I call short accounts. When things come up in your life, deal with it. And if you've been finding you've been, blowing up a lot, or you've been more emotional than normal, then I say, let's go through the checklist. Okay. How's your primary relationship? How's your work going? How's kids doing? Friendships? Anything important happened lately? Anything out of the ordinary?
Right.
And a lot of times people will say, well, this happened, but it wasn't that big a deal. Well, your reaction is telling me it was a big deal and you didn't take care of it. So let's talk about how you can deal with that issue. And a lot of times it's relationship stuff, either relationship's not going well, you're not keeping the right boundaries, with a person, you're not able to connect with a person on an intimate level like you want, things of that nature. And then that tends to spill over into other stuff. And so kind of going through that laundry list of your life and deciding, where am I not taking care of business? And maybe that's where I need to address stuff. And then that helps with the other areas.
Got it. And I was reading your bio on your website. You're not specialized, but you're informed when it comes to anxiety.
Well, yeah, I did specialize. That actually was my main work, is I worked with anxiety disorders for 20 years.
In your professional opinion, why is anxiety always something that exists And if so, why now in present time it's if it was a stock, the stock is skyrocketing. Why?
Well, anxiety, again, it's just low level fear, and anxiety is a part of life. Okay,
Hmm.
because we encounter all kinds of threats all the time. What you find again nowadays is there's a lot of things that's causing both anxiety and depression to increase, especially among the younger population. Number one is what we talked about just a few minutes ago about lack of real relationship.
Hmm.
Uh, a real fundamental core need is not being taken care of. There's also a lot of irrational thinking going on nowadays. People are getting caught up into a lot of different kinds of irrational thinking with the extreme politics and just all the other crazy stuff that's going on in our world. People are not thinking things through in a rational way. In fact, I find a lot of people come out of our schools and they don't know how to problem solve in a rational and realistic way. And so they tend to do a lot of what we call emotional reasoning. If it feels right or if it feels this way, then that must be true. Uh, to use a negative example with my anxiety clients, they a lot of times would fear passing out if they hyperventilate and had a lot of panic attacks and stuff like that. And so let's say I would say, so what are the odds of you passing out if you go to the grocery store? And they'd say something like, oh, maybe 50%. So then I'd ask them, so how many times have you passed out in your life? Well, I've never passed out. So based on what they felt, it felt likely. Based upon reality, it was very low. The second thing they would do is they would overestimate how bad it would be. So how bad would it be if you passed out in the grocery store? Oh gosh, that would, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's probably a 20. Worst thing I can imagine in my life. So let's talk about something that's really bad, like having your kid killed, having a wasting disease, getting your arm cut off, something like that. Compared to that, how bad is passing out in the grocery store? Oh, really? It goes way down the scale, right?
Hmm.
So emotional reasoning, you overestimate how bad something's going to be, and you overestimate how likely it's going to be. And when you watch evening news, and if you spend a lot of your time in talk shows, everything's a crisis, everything's awful, it's the worst thing in the world. And when you sit down and really look at it logically, you find no, it's not. But that's the way things are presented nowadays. And so people have this kind of mindset of doing a lot of emotional reasoning. And so that going back to the example of the passing out, then we'd actually talk it through. So let's talk about what you could do if you were to pass out, and then let's compress all that into a simple self-talk. Okay, the odds are low. Wouldn't it be the worst thing in the world? I got my breathing, my other things I can do, and it's probably not going to happen anyway. So I don't need to be overly concerned. And then you distract yourself. Um, Finding things to do in life that are nurturing and good for you is important. And a lot of people don't do that. They're busy in this histrionic, this high anxiety, high fear, high, stuff all the day. And if you spend like, 5, 6 hours a day listening to talk shows, watching the news, surfing the media, and doing that type of stuff, you're going to be wound up.
Yeah.
As simple as that. Just being quiet. This is why the mindfulness movement is so popular. Just this idea of being quiet and mindful for short periods of time does so much for you, and people don't get that nowadays.
Yeah, I've been told that not scary because besides creating a talk show and where it's all about
Yeah,
talking,
yeah,
I find myself majority of my time just staying quiet and really analyzing, but also just taking my surroundings.
hmm
Yeah, I think silence, it's a virtue. And it's not for everyone, but
Well,
I tend to enjoy it at
and
most
being
of my
quiet
time.
doesn't
Yeah,
mean you have to be silent, right?
yeah.
You can be doing activity. A lady I knew that was ADD, and her best time was like mowing the lawn with a hand lawnmower. She says, "I got more thinking than when I was doing that. When I'm doing that." So, it could be an activity. I play guitar. I enjoy, thinking and doing stuff like that. So, uh, quiet activity doesn't need to be necessarily quiet. It just needs to be something that calms you. And that's different for different
Mm,
people, right? Some
yeah.
people get really energized just going out with a friend, for a cup of coffee or a meal or something, or just, sitting down and talking. I mean, people used to have a lot of time to do that. You lived in a village, or you lived on your block, your neighborhood, or small town where you knew a lot of people. You lived up, you grew up with them most of your life. And nowadays, we're just, you're not living where you used to. You go move to different places for work or whatever, and people are very isolated. And so these basic human needs that we have are not getting taken care of. And so we shove entertainment, we shove excitement into that space that really is looking for a relationship.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of what you see with our society nowadays, why you get so much crazy stuff going on.
Right. Is it any way that we can identify, like, because a lot of individuals would probably have meaningful relationship, but they don't know how to identify. They haven't either they don't know values because of the culture, or they just don't know how to identify it. Like,
Right, right. So how do you identify healthy? Well, again, the book, I've got like about 20 different things that characterize a healthy family. Nobody has all of them, okay? But if you have a bunch of them, then you're doing good. So simple things like, do I feel safe around this person? If I tell them something about myself that's embarrassing or that was difficult, are they going to come back around and use that against me somewhere down the road, right? Or are they going to spread it around in places that I don't want to? So can I have disclosure with this person, talk about stuff without it getting used against me or being beaten over the head or embarrassed by it? Uh, does this person have my back, in daily life? So, gee, I had an incident where I needed to be taken down to the ER just a little while ago. I had a friend called up. My wife was out of town, so he took me down. It's great to have people like that in my life that I can rely upon. Uh, and a lot of times when you look at your family of origin, if you didn't have people like that in your family of origin, then again, you don't have people like that around you right now. Uh, that whole sense of intimacy, can I be quiet with this person and by intimacy, I'm not talking necessarily about sex, but I'm talking about, can we share things with one another, right? That's a really important thing, along with this idea of being safety. Uh, do I have fun with this person? Are they enjoyable? Do we have some shared interest is always important if you're going to have a relationship. Is there some way, some area of your life, music or sports or a hobby or something that you share? Which is why a lot of times when you're looking for, friends that are going to be meaningful, you go to like a bicycling club or some other kind of, dance group or some other kind of a hobby or interest that you have, and that gives you a place where you have people that have shared interests. Now that's a pool of people. I can start looking for people, that I can start to have a relationship with. Uh, if you don't have any good friends in your orbit, if you will, understand that most people have already filled out their dance card. In the old days, you'd go to a dance and you have this card, and people would write in, okay, I'm going to do the waltz, I'm going to do the foxtrot. You have like a dance card, right? And I used to tell people that, I mean, it's been 100 years since we did that, but I use that analogy because when I'm looking for friends, I need to understand that most people, their dance card is full. You can only have so many really intimate relationships in your life. It's just, and that's appropriate. You got a lot of casual friends. You have 3 or 4 good friends, at least 2 maybe, uh, and the rest are going to be, not as intense as that. And maybe that you're trying to make friends, ask somebody out for coffee, and try to get together with them, and they're just always busy. Well, all that means is not that you're inadequate or something's wrong with you. It just means their dance card's full. And so you got to go find somebody else where their friends moved out of town or something's happened. So there's a space open on their dance card, right?
Right.
And that's somebody then that you can then connect with. And if you're older, then of course their dance card is more full, right? So, but there's people out there that are looking for a relationship, and you can find people that you can have good relationships with. You can have fun together. You can enjoy them. You can feel safe with them. You can just have good times together. And having some people like that, it's so much more rewarding in the long run, than having exciting experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, But again, we're raised, we have a culture where on the media, excitement is equated with fun and the good life. In fact, you look at like the Indiana Jones type of character, right?
Yeah.
You know, lot of women think that's the type of person I want, somebody who's exciting, or the guy wants the woman who's exciting, right? Well, they leave you in the end. They don't stick around, right? Because they're
Hmm.
moving on to more excitement somewhere else, and they're not the type of person you want. I would tell singles always, you know, that boring person really is the person that's going to make the best mate long term. You know, the one
Uh,
who's not so exciting. They may be a little bit on the boring side, but you're going to find they're the one who's going to stick with you through thick and thin. They're the one who's going to be reliable. They're the one who's going to be uh, the person that's really going to make you happy long run. But we get sold a good bill of goods through through our movies and our media and stuff as to what's going to make me happy.
mm,
And I think that's why so many people are having such transient relationships and are not very satisfied with their life. I think the other thing is people think that they're looking for somebody that's going to make them happy. And that's another big myth that people run into. No human being is going to make me happy,
gotta
right?
make yourself happy.
And they will have things about them that will satisfy some of my needs, but no human being is going to satisfy all of my needs.
Mm.
I have to have other things, other places that I can. I like my wife. She's got her girlfriends. She's got her group that she works with. I got my band I play with. I got other things I do. You know, I got this here. My wife has no interest in watching me on any of my interviews or anything, which is okay. You know, we connect in other ways, you know. So you find that your partner is not going to meet all of your needs, and you hear so often, well, you're not meeting my needs. Well, maybe you're putting too much on this person. Maybe you need to find some other people that will meet some of those things where that your partner has a deficit in that area. So that when you do get together, the needs that this person is meeting is going to be satisfying because the other parts of you are whole as well.
I I think yeah, that makes sense. I think it's good to have friends and where you can partake one day
Yeah.
and your spouse the other and live all because we all need those things.
And again, it used to be you had those kinds of people all around you. You know,
Yeah.
you go back, 80 years, and yeah, you had lots of people in your environment, aunts and uncles or neighbors or people you grew up with that met those different needs. And now, especially, in the last 50 years, people have lost all of that. Again, people grow up so isolated. I mean, I can got my garage door opener, I got my things in my ear, my earbuds, and I go to work and I come home and I can spend the whole day without any kind of interaction with other people, right? Or very superficial interactions.
Yeah. Small talk, like small talk
Yeah.
and just I get what you're saying.
Mm.
I have one question. You that has experience helping other couples and marriages. I often find myself giving advice to and I get a lot asked a lot because I've been married for 8 years now, and they're always asking for advice, and I always tell them like if you're married, then you talk to somebody who's married who can identify what you're going through, but
Right.
you can't really talk to about your marriage to somebody who's not married because they wouldn't begin to fathom the understanding.
Yeah.
I
Which is why it's nice to have some couples friends, right?
Yeah. And I always tell them like, you can be in a relationship for 8 years and not be married, but being married and being in a relationship are two different things. Am
Right.
I am I wrong for giving that advice?
Okay, I'm not exactly sure. You mean you can be married without being married? You know, like the work wife or whatever.
No, no, like okay, so someone who's married is getting advice from somebody who's not married. And
Well,
I and
it's
I
it depends, I mean a therapist who's been trained in all this stuff probably is going to be okay because again a lot of the issue it's kind of like going to a gynecologist. Do you have to have a woman gynecologist to deliver your baby because
mm,
he's never delivered a baby? Well, I mean, there's a lot of great guys out there that can do just a fine job because through their education and stuff and through their experience, they've learned a lot of the problems and a lot of the issues involved, right? So it's possible to have a good a person who understands relationships and stuff, who's not married. It depends upon why you're going to them. If you're going there because you have a hard time negotiating, maybe you need to learn negotiation skills with your partner. Some might be an area of your relationship where maybe this person has no experience or knowledge. So I think it really depends upon the specifics of what you're talking about. Like fair fighting, you can learn that from most people. They don't have to necessarily know how to be married in order to teach that. Again, you have to have a person who's willing to learn it, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
The
everybody's
worst.
willing. Not everybody's willing. I mean,
Yeah.
you find in marital counseling, the one spouse will bring the other person to you to fix them, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, here's this person, fix this person, so they'll be what I want, right?
But that's normal. They always want to. I get what you're saying.
But usually both people need to work on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not a single person issue usually.
They like to they like to say that, it's 100 and 100. Each person has to put 100. But I
Mhm.
find that sometimes so unrealistic because you can, sometimes you get cheated out,
Yeah,
with the understanding that some days you're probably going to do more than the other.
it is, and again, that's why it's important early on to find somebody who has the capacity for the type of relationship you're looking for. And not just do you focused on are they exciting or sexy or whatever, but do they have these other qualities, which unfortunately, because you're young and stupid when you pick your mate, you usually aren't looking at that type of stuff, right? Uh, I I joke a lot when I'm waiting in a line and the person will apologize. Well, I'm sorry for making you wait for so long. I'll say, well, I've been married 49 years. I'm a patient man.
Can we
Yeah,
can you give for everybody who's listening and watching, can you give a brief description on your background, because some people would find it and say, what is he talking about, or what is he
yeah.
saying? And I think you just reading your research and reading what I've gathered, you really know your stuff, and you make a lot of sense in where the public, sometimes we have our head up our tush, right, and we're not
Yeah.
able to realize the simple things that the advice you've been able to give us for this whole episode.
Well, yeah, and it is a problem because a lot of times people don't want to hear it because
Preach.
they're so immersed in what media and the culture has sold them as to what happiness is all about. You know, uh, again, we're in a culture that's very mechanistic. I'm just a little machine. When I'm dead, I'm gone. So my purpose is to be here and get as much good stuff as I can. Good stuff means excitement and entertainment and all about me. They joke that that's why your arms come in, right? Because it's all about me. Getting all the stuff I can get, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and it turns out there's more in life than that. In fact, well, you asked about my background. My original degrees were biology and chemistry, math minors. I was interested in animal behavior. Been interested ever since I was a kid. Raised chickens, rabbits, dog, parrot, cats, all that stuff. So I was interested in animal behavior. Had a friend of mine who was a counselor, a good friend, really liked what he was doing. So he got me interested in going in and getting my master's in counseling, specialized in anxiety disorders for 20 years, and needed to get my kids through college. So I took a job at a little local college teaching psych and did that for 20 years. And now I write
Wow.
and teach and do different stuff. So yeah, so I've been interested in emotions and all that stuff all my life. Been fascinating. And so in this most recent book, I wrap up with the three things that make you happy. And we've been talking a lot about the relationship, which is the big one. But the other two things, the second one is purpose, having a purpose in life. And purpose can be very simple. I'm going to I'm here to raise my kids. I'm here to sell the most widgets I can. I'm here to be the best, musician I can be or whatever, or it can be broader. I'm here to somehow contribute, to society, to make people's lives better, to create meals that people will really enjoy. Uh, I mean, part of my purpose in life, and you can have more than one. I mean, my kids were part of my purpose when they were growing up. Uh, Part of my purpose is, helping people. And the broader the purpose, usually the more successful and happier you are. And then the third one is the hard one to define because it's a little bit squishy, and that's meaning. So having meaning in life. Meaning has to do with the what we call the existential, my existence part of you. Is there a God? Is there not a God? What's the purpose of life? What really makes people happy? Why am I here? Why is there something rather than nothing? So those kind of big questions. We grew up in a culture where we don't even think about those questions very much anymore because we're so focused on, again, entertainment and, just the more superficial stuff. And yet when bad stuff happens, that's what gets you through it and helps you give context to your life with all of the positive and negative things that you experience. Uh, I know one of the things, and I just mentioned it very briefly in the book, but one of the things I like people to think about is just some of the near-death experiences and research that's been going on. I have one research that I put in there of a very large sample, and they come to the conclusion that there's something going on. We can't explain it. I mean, this whole thing got started in the 70s with a guy named Moody who wrote a book, Life After Life. And a lot of people now have been kind of paying attention to people who have these experiences that say maybe there is something after we die. Maybe there is some kind of a spiritual realm. And if there is, maybe I need to work that into my belief system somehow. Now, I'm not going to get into any specifics because that's up for people to explore on their own. But I open the door that maybe there is some meaning to your life beyond just, having a sexy mate or, having the most fun I can have or making money or things of that nature. If there is, and it's a little bit bigger than some of those superficial things, then that's something that, again, helps to enrich your life along with the relationship and my purpose. But these three things, by and far, more than anything else, relationship, purpose, and meaning. If you have those, then you do well in life. And when you look at, again, especially the younger generation, what are they lacking? They're lacking purpose, relationship, and meaning. And again, that explains a lot of the anxiety and anger and other stuff that seems to be increasing in our culture.
Yeah. I've recently had a gentleman on the podcast all the way from Australia. I still haven't released the episode, but he was an older gentleman. His name was Ian, I think Waterspoon. Apologize if I botched his last name, but he's an older gentleman where he read a book and while reading this book, he had a certain enlightenment and where, he quit his job and started a journey helping others create a nonprofit foundations to help men with mental health. And I had him on the podcast. He's older and he's telling me, it brought me to tears because, he's dying of cancer. Like and in the episode, I had to stop it several times because he has he's coughing out blood clots and whatnot. And you can see, although he's going through what he's going through, he still has this purpose of helping others.
Right. And that gives meaning to his life. And again, he's got a wider view. And in spite of what he's going through, I'm sure that allows him to go through that differently from somebody who's got a very, who does not have a very clearly thought out sense of why I'm here and those types of things. I mean, I'll just share this last weekend. I went into the ER with a cardiac problem. I've got cardiovascular stuff, and I'm doing fine. I got my heart monitor on, so my heart was going down. It got down to about 37 beats a minute, which they're all getting concerned about it, but I'm at peace with all that stuff. I have no problem with that. If I live, I live. If I die, I know where I'm going. And it's a different attitude from people who get scared to death over every little thing. And when you read these millionaires, there's one guy who's spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on MRI, just trying to live forever. It's a pathetic life to live. Kind of like Howard Hughes, who had all that money and He had a germ phobic and ended up in a dark room just all by himself, at the end of his life.
Yeah.
It's coming to accept life what it is and putting some context in it is very important. And if a person who's listening to this hasn't done that, then I would just encourage you to take some time to, talk to people, do some reading, think about that. How do you put context into your life?
Mhm. I, I feel that 100%. I had a gentleman called Daniel Jackson.
Hmm.
He's a spiritual mediator,
Hmm.
and he's talking about like how uh okay, so like he's talking about how the spirits go inside of him, and he becomes a vessel of,
Yeah, he's a medium. Yeah.
yeah. So he talks about that he has come into this life several times,
Mm.
through other vessels, bodies, everything, right? And I just speaking on what you're saying, man. Like I'm 34, and I wouldn't want to come back to this life, honestly. Like I'm checked out. I'm checked out just because, it's surreal that the world we live in,
It,
and
it is, but you can find joy and peace
yes,
even
yes,
within all the stuff that's going on around us.
yes,
And it's a matter, that's part of, that's one of life's tasks, right? How do I find people to surround I mean, I've got a small group that I've been meeting with for over 20 years. I know, some of them have come and gone, but they know me really well. When I went to the hospital this weekend, they were all, they're checking in and stuff. And it's, I feel loved. I feel like I'm accepted and I have a place. And, if I leave tomorrow, so be it.
yeah,
But, while I'm here, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm helping people. And I do have meaning and purpose in my life as well as
correct,
relationship. And so that gives me a peace that's hard to explain to other people,
yes,
who don't have it. But it's there. It can be obtained, but you have to go out and find it. You can't,
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
going to come to your door knocking.
I wonder, and this is a question I guess has emerged in my mind numerous of time throughout the years. Is it better to have a life uh, with a roller coaster of emotions than just live a dull life that has no beating points?
Well, you got to be comatose or dead in order to have that, right? Uh, you're going to have emotions. I think the question is more, what kind of emotions do you want?
Mm,
You can have that roller coaster, that drama, or you can have, peace. But peace doesn't mean you don't ever have excitement. I mean, you
correct.
certainly have points of joy, and you have points of excitement, points of fun. Uh, but again, you come back down, and at the end of the day, you can settle down, and there's just a contentment and a peace, and that's, I think, kind of your base point. And
Mm,
then from that, then you go out and you do things, and yeah, you have interest. Like I said, unless you're dead or comatose, you're going to have things you want, your things you want to
yeah,
do, and,
correct.
and things that will bring you joy. And so find things that bring you joy in life, but at the same time, do it within that context of having, your relationships and, your purpose and meaning, so that, um, in between those nodes of excitement and, fun, you also have that you go to bed at night and you're at peace. You
Yes, yes,
sleep soundly, you wake up refreshed, your dreams are positive, you know.
yeah. Before we go, can you, if you had one, word of advice to anyone, not any category in particular, but just going through something, difficult, challenging, or is just having trouble letting go or certain aspects, just anything. What are, in your 20 plus years doing what you're doing, understanding these anxiety, anger, emotion journey, what
If
what
you've got
advice would you give them?
if you've got stuff going on in your life and you're feeling stuck, I mean, certainly there's a lot of things, like my book that help, but get some help. Go find somebody who deals with whatever it is you're dealing with, and have them help you. There's no reason to stay stuck and to stay in pain when there are proven solutions and help out there. You may have to go through two, three people to find the right person, And nowadays, with the internet, there's people that do internet counseling that can be just as effective as, face to face if you live someplace where, you don't have local resources. So a lot of good stuff out there, a lot of help. So don't stay in pain, get unstuck, find somebody to help you move on.
Boom. There you have it, guys. Before we go, please tell the people we can find your amazing book and your other books.
Well, the easiest place to go to my website, it's whyemotions.com. So whyemotions.com has links to my books, some free stuff, some free MP3 downloads for relaxation tapes, and links into my some interviews and YouTube things. And so it's whyemotions.com has got everything to do with me.
Boom, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Go get his book. Why Do You Feel the Way You Do is out now. Go support him. Go get his book. Go get, some mental health, relationship, whatever you need. The help is there. Obviously, he has more than enough knowledge to help you. And make sure you go subscribe to DIOTALK TV. Go follow me on Instagram, Mr.DreamSpire10. I'm all, guys. Have a good night.